Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is where you're coming in from. We're so excited that you're here with us today for this month's CMWS Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series' webinar. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Senior Manager of Field Learning at Mentor National. And today we're here for the third part of our three-part series on parent engagement. This one will be focusing on building an evidence-based approach for parent engagement and mentoring. We have a really amazing panel of experts in this field, so I'm really excited to dive in. We'll just give folks another few seconds to a minute or so to get settled in. So while folks are coming on in, please feel free to drop your name and where you're calling in from in the chat. We have a few other ways to get to know you all during the webinar, but for now, as you're settling in, drop your name and where you're calling in from, and then we'll get started. For folks who are just joining in, welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Thanks, Rob, for kicking us off. Rob from Detroit, thank you for being here. We're just giving folks about a minute or so to get settled. Kristen from Washington, got a couple folks from Washington, love to see it, as we begin our part 3 of our 3-part series on parent engagement and mentoring. So take just about another 30 seconds or so. Awesome, love to see everybody coming in from all over the place. Tennessee, Iowa, Texas, California, Massachusetts. Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. UK, okay, I love to see the international representation. That's always fun. Connecticut, Missouri, Alabama. We're really getting all corners of the country, plus and extended. Love to see it. Awesome. So I'm going to move on just because we do have a jam-packed webinar full of good stuff for you all. So going to go over some tips for engagement. You're already doing some of it, meaning that you're using the chat to introduce yourselves. Continue to do that throughout the webinar. We want to get to know you. We really want to hear your ideas, your insights, your experiences. We'll have some polls and things like that throughout the webinar for you to engage with as well. Share any resources that you have. Something that's a theme throughout this webinar that you'll notice is that a lot of this research and a lot of the evidence base is something that's still being built. So we want to hear your experiences. We want to hear your resources and make those connections. For any questions, we will have a dedicated question and answer section at the end of the webinar. And so put your questions in the Q&A section, which is another feature on your toolbar. And then you can also upvote any questions that you'd like to see answered. As always, you can click the live captions if you haven't already to enable closed captioning so that you can see what we're saying on your screen. And then this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out in about a week, usually less, with the slides and any other resources and contact information that we shared today. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce our moderator for today, Zalon Harrison, who is a really amazing parent advocate. You might recognize her from the previous 2 webinars. She's been a mainstay in this series and has been able to provide a lot of really incredible insight into what it's like to be a parent in mentoring programs and youth development more broadly. As you can see here, she has a breadth of experience and expertise and leadership in this field. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Zalon.
Thank you, Jake. I am so happy to be here with you all. Thank you all for coming here and being with us today. We are looking forward to a great show and wrapping this up with our series. You guys have been awesome. All of you guys that have been coming and participating. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. And I would like to introduce our next person coming up. And Dot, are you gonna do some housekeeping for us?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dusty Ann North from the California Mentoring Partnership, and I'm just kind of a audience participation and context monitor today. So I'll be supporting Zolan and the team here to move us along. Happy to be here. Let's go to the next slide. We want to find out a little bit more about who's here. Thanks for putting your info in the chat. So just to get a sense of what roles people play in our field, if you can go ahead and check the right box for yourself today. It's always good to know what professional role professional role or lived role people are bringing to the space so that we can better meet your needs. As usual with these webinars, lots of mentoring program staff and practitioners. We've also got some mentors. That's wonderful. A couple of educators and TA providers, at least 1 or 2 national or affiliate staff. That's great. Good to see everyone. One researcher, Maybe that's one of our panelists. Oh no, actually we're not allowed to vote. So we have at least one researcher in the audience and today's a research topic. So clearly we have more work to do reaching out to the researchers in the field to get them into these sessions, but we've got some good ones here for you today. Awesome. Good to see everybody. All right, I think most people have answered. Jake, should we move on? All right, and then we asked this question last time as well. Curious, how many of you identify in these ways? If you're willing to say, it's okay if you don't want to. And I'll say that we had discussion about what should be included in this slide. And our intention is not at all to lump large numbers and different cultures together here. One thing we know from research in the field, and we've talked about this on previous sessions, is that a majority of mentoring program staff and of mentors are often white and often middle class or affluent in some way. And a majority of youths and families served are often of color and or working class. And so there is this kind of disparity dichotomy in our field. And so we wanted to see how that's reflected here. So we wanted to be clear about why we've asked the question this way. And it looks today like we're about half and half in terms of BIPOC versus white, and a couple of you either prefer not to say or fit into another identity. Thank you for being willing to share about that. I know as a culture, we're still moving into feeling comfortable talking in these terms, and it's important for the work that we're doing here. So thank you for your shares that way. Okay, good. Someone asked, does Hispanic people count as people of color? That would be up to you. It's how you identify. I know right on the census, they say there's white Hispanic and then there's non-white Hispanic. I'm not of that background, so I don't know all the nuances, but it's however you identify works for us here. Thanks for the question, Mark. Okay, so I think we can close the poll. Did everybody get to see the results? I can't tell what people can see and what. Okay, good. Because the poll is still up for me. Jake, if you want to drop it.
You might just have to X out on your own screen.
Oh, got it. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so just to recap where we've been, this is the third segment of a three-part series. Our first session in February was really specifically focusing and centering parent voices. We had Zalan and we also had Kiona Rose, who's one of our team and is a wonderful parent organizer and advocate and leader. And we really focused on parent perspectives. On the second session, we were looking at policy perspectives and practice recommendations with Hank Roberts and Dr. Crystal Jackson, and Zalan was with us as well there. So today we're turning to the research and what we can learn from that and how we build an evidence base on this topic. Can we go to the next slide? So the conversation so far, next slide, please. There's been this sort of key theme that's come up in all three sessions, whether we're hearing from parents, whether we're talking about practice and policy. There's this historical and unfortunately continuing exclusion or neglect of the issue of parent engagement in mentoring. It has traditionally been neglected or excluded from mentoring discussions. It's not addressed enough in many mentoring programs. There's not a lot of practice guidelines. And the spoiler for today, unfortunately, is that we see that exclusion in the research base on mentoring as well. So we're going to dig into that issue today. Next slide, please. But we also have heard you loud and clear, and we feel the same too, which is that you don't want to just come here and talk about all the reasons why we don't know more and why it's been a problem. You want to know, what can I do better in my program today, especially for all of you who are practitioners, which is the vast majority of our audience. So you want to know, I think, what the lived experience that we've learned from in the last couple sessions, the practice wisdom we've been talking about in policy work, but also what the research can and can't tell us about actually engaging parents in mentoring. You want to know what to do. We do too. And we want to both have discussion about that and offer that. And we have wonderful experts here who can share about that. And we also want to be honest about the fact that because there's a lack of knowledge base here, we can share perspectives, we can generate ideas, but there's no proven tactics from the mentoring field on what should be done, right? So our goal, given all of that, our goals for today, one is, instead of thinking of the 3 sessions as separate, we're kind of snowballing all the perspectives that we've been pulling together. So those parent voices, those practice and policy wisdom, the practice and policy wisdom, and now the research perspectives, to together come up with some ideas about what programs can do now, because we know that's what you really want to know, but also how can we all together be working to build that knowledge base. If there isn't a knowledge base, then we could just throw some strategies at you, but then we're kind of back where we started, where there's just ideas floating around, but we're not getting anywhere with building the knowledge base. Our movement has been working on building a knowledge base, and we're using sessions like this to do that. So just like we had some polls last time and some questions for you, we'll be collecting information from you today, and we're going to be building on information you gave us last time and hearing from experts. So part of our goal here is to build that knowledge base since it's lacking. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to hand off to Zalan, who's going to lead us in some of our panelists sharing what we do and don't know about research, from the research about parent engagement and mentoring. So Zalan, you want to set us up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dustin. I have to remember to say that. I have my love names for everybody.
Oh, you can
Thank
call me that.
you.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I want to introduce a wonderful, wonderful person that I've grown to know over the years, Renee Spencer. She is an excellent, awesome person. She's a professional and associate of deans at Boston University. She's a fellow of the American and Academic of Social Work and Social Welfare. This is my favorite part. She's a researcher, and what she's researching, promoting positive and meaningful mentoring relationships. Renee is awesome. I've done a lot of work with Renee over the couple of years we've known each other, and she's really dedicated to her work. She is a team player, and she gets in there and pulls her sleeves up and really dedicates her time to this work of getting it right. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce to you Renee Spencer. Whoop, whoop. Go, Renee.
Thank you so much, Salon. I tell you what, I think being called awesome by you is one of the highest compliments I've ever received. I really appreciate that.
You are awesome, Renee. You are dedicated to this work, and I thank you.
Jake, I think we can go to the next slide. And I'm just going to give us this super brief overview. And unfortunately, that matches our knowledge base, as Dustian was suggesting, on the research on parent engagement and mentoring. I love that we're talking about this as building a knowledge base, because that's exactly what we need to do, is really build a much stronger knowledge base about this to have good guidance for programs out there. I know that people are hungry for this. We have good evidence that parent engagement is important. There's a meta-analysis that found that programs that engaged parents in some way, very broadly defined, got better outcomes in their mentoring programs. So that's pretty important. And that aligns with what we know about parent engagement in other fields. And there's some qualitative work. I've done some of it with my colleague, Tonya Basualdo-Delmonico, where we did some qualitative work really centering parent voices and asking parents what their expectations are of mentoring programs and of the mentoring relationship. And it was very illuminating and provided a pretty different perspective from how parents were spoken about in the literature up to that point. And then Tom Keller, back in 2005, introduced this wonderful model, systemic model of mentoring relationships, where you can see that parents, caregivers, family members are key players in the mentoring process. It's not just about the mentor-youth dyad, but there's a whole context around these mentoring relationships with parents and caregivers being key players in the process, as our program staff. And I think this was really an important innovation that Tom brought to the field at that time. But the uptake on this way of thinking has really been limited, at least in the research world so far. And this is really surprising, I think, in light of how we know now how important parent engagement is in other fields, where parent engagement is really centered in education, and there are important calls for doing it better. And there's a lot of evidence of people trying to get better at it, do better. and try to identify what the best practices are, and in other related fields, in wraparound services for mental health, these kinds of things where we know that engaging caregivers is just critical to the success of these programs. So it remains interesting to me that in the mentoring field, in the research world at least, it has not been taken up and really made a centerpiece of the work that we're doing. And one of the things that you'll be hearing more about that I think is at play here are some implicit biases around race and class, about sort of who people are who are seeking mentoring services and what their role ought to be in this process, and kind of whether, whose voices get centered. So I think that's one factor. I think there are a number of factors at play, but this is really a call to say we need to do better in the research world. And in the absence of that, then we've really got to widen our perspective, look at various sources that we can draw from, and find ways to help programs do the kind of really good work that I know folks want to do, and to get better at engaging parents and caregivers. I also think there's a lot of stuff happening on the ground that many of you who are program practitioners are probably engaging in some pretty innovative practices that we're not hearing about. They're not sort of bubbling up and getting represented in the research literature. So hoping that we can see some change on that front as well, so we can just, again, build a much stronger evidence base. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Zalan, and Jake, I think you can go to the next slide for us.
Oh, Zalan, you're muted.
Okay, so I can't see the screen, I'm sorry. I'm introducing Dr. Numley now. Okay, all right. Our strategies to address gaps, right? So right now I'm going to be introducing Dr. Numley, right, Dustin? Okay. All right.
Yeah, that would be great. We could just say as a little precursor that since there's this lack of knowledge in the mentoring field, our strategy has been to look to Indigenous knowledge, and that doesn't just mean lived knowledge. We have some wonderful expert scholars from culturally driven fields that have done incredible work around family engagement for BIPOC populations, and so we've built relationships with some wonderful scholars in our movement that we're excited to share with you today. So that was just kind of a little context we wanted to give. Take it away, Zalan.
Thank you for that support. I was reading my notes. I want to introduce to you also this wonderful, one of our panelists. She's so wonderful, wonderful. She's also a mentor to me in this work, Dr. Kurumba Numley. Patricia's her first name, as y'all saw on her bio here. She's a professor with 25 years of professional education and teaching. She teaches with the Afrocentric model, and she has touched so many different platforms. This woman, I have so much to say about her that's not on that I was reading her bio, but I'll stick to her bio. She's done professional development with a lot of organizations, as you see on here. She's the president of the Bay Area chapter of the Black Psychologists Association. She has given so much to so many communities, educating on early childhood education and research, giving best practice models for people of color. She's done a lot of work in her community, and she has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so happy to present to us today Dr. Patricia Numley.
Thank you, Zalan, Dr. Zalan. Okay, y'all. So my favorite thing that people need to know about me in this particular space is I work for Zalan. That's it, that's all. Okay, so now that you know that, next slide, please. Okay, so guess what, everyone? Even when you have the research, the data, how do you interpret what you have? So let's play a little game, okay? So we're gonna take a test. Is everyone ready? So I guess what we can do, we can put it in the chat, maybe, I don't know. So everyone, please don't yell it out. I just want you to take this pie test. And now take the pie test and put your answer in the chat, okay? It might overload the chat, I don't know, we're gonna try. So, what type of pie is this? Okay, and don't cheat and look at other folks. Here we go. Let me give, oh, next slide. I'm thinking of next slide. What type of pie is that, y'all? That one. So why don't you put pie number 1? What type of pie is that? Okay, that's pie number 1, okay? Now, here we go. You ready? When I count to 5, we're going to go to the next slide and we're going to be on pie number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pie number 2. What type of pie is that? Here we go. Pie 2, answer. Pie 2, answer. Answer, answer, answer. I love it. I see them coming in, coming in. Pie 2, answer, answer, answer for pie 2. Okay, I'm going to count to 5 again, and then we're going to go to pie 3. This time I'm going to count backwards, right? It's really important to teach our children to go both ways, right? Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Watch this. 0 is the number. Please teach your children that. All right, this is pie number 3. What kind of pie is that? Pie 3. Put them in there. Pie 3. Pie 3. What is pie 3? 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 All right. Now we are going to close the pie poll just to give you some hints. Ready? Next slide. Ooh, there we go. This is the actual answer, y'all. Now that you see this, which one was pie number 1? Pie number 1 is the one that's on your far, if you're looking at your screen, on the left side. That's pie number 1. So now what is that really? Pie number 1. Okay, now the hint for pie number 2. Look in the center of your slide. That is the hint for pie number 2. Look at that, look at that. That's the hint for pie number 2. Now, the hint for pie number 3 is on the far right-hand side. What type of pie? So now I'm gonna, for the sake of time, so guess what? Pie number 1 is called pumpkin pie. Uh-oh. Pie 2, bean pie. Pie 3, sweet potato pie. So we got pumpkin, pie 1, bean, pie 2, and sweet potato pie, pie 3. All right, so don't worry. We got another test. Here we go. Next one, please, next slide. All right, this is easy. Side dish or main dish? Side dish or main dish? Not the name of the dish. I saw somebody put the name. Is it side? So it's supposed to represent macaroni and cheese. Is it a side dish or is it a main dish? Which one? When we say side or main, it's like a binary, right? So, all right. Okay. I know that some people call this a main dish because cheese has protein, and that's meat, right? And others will say, oh, no, 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 that has to go with some other stuff. Okay, next slide, please. Last one. How many sides does a coin have? How many sides does a coin have? All right. Again, for the sake of time, we'll go to the next slide. And the next one after that. 2 sides are heads and tails, correct? Next slide. Ah, but there's a third side. Look, see the edges? And I see some people even put four slides. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Your answer to each of these things depends on your world view. Again, your answer depends on your worldview. What the heck is a worldview? Next slide, please. So before I give you the answer, I need you to know that everyone has a worldview, and your worldview, it determines how you think, how you function, how you move in the world. So your worldview is very, very important. So it's just your view of the world. Everybody has one. Lottie, Dottie, everybody, regardless of race, creed, you all got one. Next slide, please. These are the components of a worldview. So we could do something, and I don't know if we have time for interactive, right? No, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so components of a worldview. There's 4 components. If we were doing this interactively, touch right here. Touch your like your brain, your head, right? And the first one, and we're gonna make like a pistol, but don't point it at the screen. We don't shoot anybody. Epistemology. Okay. So the first is epistemology. That's how you think, how you understand things. The next one, take your hand, put it out, act like you have an axe handle. Axiology. So bring it out. Axiology. That's your value system. You know, what you think is valuable, not valuable. Now, the next one, you're going to act like you're going to jump on top of something. Jump up, right? So ontology. The ontology is what the meaning of being, what does it mean to be? And the last one is cosmology, right? How things are structured. So a worldview has 4 components. First one, epistemology. Next one, axiology. Next, ontology. And then cosmology. There's no particular order. So your worldview, how you think about things, how you see things, is based on your culture. And Dr. I'm struggling with the word because I call him Bob G. Okay, so Dr. Lawford Goddard, who is my Baba, he's my Baba G. He's going to talk more about this, but I want you to remember. So sometimes, you know how Baba's older people, they like really, really smart, y'all, right? And they be talking like high up there sometimes. So when he says that worldview thing, this is what he talking about, y'all, okay? It's how your culture causes you to think a certain way. All right, next slide, please. And as I said already, your culture informs your worldview. And so if you think of that, everybody hears about that iceberg thing, right? That iceberg, the stuff you see on the top, and then the bottom is that deep stuff nobody knows about, right? Like I dress African, you know, all the time and stuff. So you see that, but why? What's going on? So that deep, deep culture stuff that we don't always see. Okay, next slide, please. And I have this really cute thing that I've done. I made it up like in 2014, right? Where it talks about how an African worldview is different from a Western or a Eurocentric worldview. We live in the USA, we live in a Western society, and our research and most of the things we do, guess what? We do it from a Western worldview. Now, guess what? Even if you don't live in the USA, the West rocks really strong, right? Because of all the money we have, all this kind of our military power, things are shifting and changing. Yeah, I know that, right? But traditionally, we have been the one that rules everything. And now, wait, hopefully there are no children in here. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be a little controversial. Ready? Now so there is another Baba I have, Dr. Wade Nobles. And Baba Wade, he talks about the 3 P's of power. And the way the US has run their power, you ready, y'all? It's kind of going to be the peso, the pistol, and the penis. Woo. Peso is money. We have a lot of money. Pistol, we have military might. Penis, you know what that means, right? So you know, we figure out Pocahontas. Let's so this is how you make a culture go away. So the 3 P's of power. nobles is peso, pisto, and penis. Okay, so now that's in a Western worldview. We're going to do an African worldview, and this is like my last slide here, okay? So and then we're going to turn it over to my Baba. So in an African worldview, there's not one, but two worlds. The worlds are the visible and the invisible. And in this African worldview, each person is connected to a single energy source. Each person connected to a single energy source. And guess what? That energy source in this African worldview allows us, me right now, all of us, to be in the past, the present, and the future, all at the same time. So basically, an African worldview believes in the metaphysical, not just the physical. So now what if you're looking at this data, right? And you have a Western worldview and you talk about there's some invisible forces and stuff. What the heck, right? So it's really, really important to understand, even after you collect the data, depending on who's looking at it and who's writing the interpretation, it could be very, very different. So with that, I am done, and I'm gonna turn you over to
Thank you.
Thank you. Give yourselves a
Thank you
big
so
hand.
much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, I'm gonna go
Thank you,
on mute now.
Dr. Numley. You are awesome. You are so, so awesome. But y'all ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, and that's not just her, Baba G. So I just want to say that Dr. Gardner, he is out in the community. He is awesome. So he is shared. He's everybody's Baba G. So I'm gonna just grace our presence with Dr. Gardner. Oh my goodness. He's done so much to contribute to not only this work, but a lot of work in our community, our nation. You can see his bio here. I know him personally. I'm learning stuff on his bio that, as you guys can see, all the wonderful things he's done and who he is and the research, and he is the founding member of the chapter of the, no, not the chapter, the Bay Area, no, excuse me, the Black Psychologists Association, because the Bay Area is Dr. Numley. He goes past that. He's nationwide. He has done so much research in our nation, community, our city, our state. He's kept us abreast of a lot of good things that we could do to build our future. Is so much stuff I want to say about him that we can utilize today to build upon our research work. So I'm gonna let y'all read all his wonderful things, and I'm gonna let him go and share with us to keep the flow going, what he has to bring to us. So Baba G, it's your turn.
Greetings, everyone from Santa Clara, California. I'm honored to be a part of this panel and honored to have the opportunity to share some of the information that we will bring to you about research and how we approach this issue of caregiver engagement in the mentoring process. Next slide, please. So the critical task that we are faced with today, given what both Renee Zalan, Dr. Nunley spoke about, and what we had covered in the first two sessions, is really how we create a knowledge, how we engage in knowledge production to generate authentic data around this peer-giver engagement. And this need for authenticity requires us to do some epistemological correction. As we have heard, the research on mentoring has by and large not taken up this issue of caregiver engagement. So we're entering into a new field. Next slide, please. So this new field requires us to engage and create an alternate or new paradigm. And a new paradigm gives us a different conceptualization of the phenomenon that's being studied. The phenomenon that we are studying is caregiver and is mentorship and mentoring relationship. It provides a new research strategy or methodological procedure for gathering empirical evidence, and it suggests new problems for solution. So the application of this new paradigm often provides a more adequate explanation of the phenomenon that's being studied, or explains the phenomenon that previous paradigms were unable to explain. Paradigms essentially is the formative framework that allows the researcher to bring order and clarity to the problem that's being studied. Paradigms often create close communities in which certain questions are outside of the areas of concern. Next slide, please. So part of the request for this paradigm shift is that there's dissatisfaction often emerges with the existing paradigm in terms of its inability to explain certain phenomenon. And as we talk about this alternate paradigm, the alternate paradigm for us requires a culturally grounded framework. Culturally grounded framework uses the cultural worldview of both the research participants and the researcher as a framework for the design of the research process. And it's design, data collection, data analysis, interpretation, how we interpret the data, and ultimately the dissemination of the findings. Traditionally, researchers disseminate their findings in refereed journals, in published articles. The culturally grounded framework suggests or requires that we report back to the community where the knowledge came from. Next slide, please. So this calls then for us to do community participatory research. And community participatory research challenges the power dimension in traditional research. There's a power dimension between, and a power difference between the researcher and the subject. And in this process, so someone wrote, it looks like we're speaking in a different language. Essentially, we're speaking English with a Trinidad, Jamaican, and American accent, part of the re-socialization that I've gone through in terms of my speech patterns. But community participatory research shares power between the researcher and the community. It is an exchange of information. And we're also suggesting that the researcher has to be involved as a participant observer in the community being studied. Too often, researchers come into the community, gather the information, and leave the community. And this process, we often refer to this as scientific colonialism, in which the raw products, the data is taken outside and located in the university and processed as a finished product. And the knowledge base is then transferred from the community to the outside agency, scientific colonialism. And scientific colonialism then, rather than going to the community agents where the knowledge is, the experts are located in the university. So rather than talking to families in West Oakland about the solution that they can offer, the practitioners go to the expert at UC Berkeley, at Stanford, who have a limited knowledge of the lived experience of the population that they're talking about. So the researcher shares with the community the features of the research process as equal partners, and they report back to the community. And this is a critical point because it ensures that the knowledge base, power, knowledge is power, remains within the community. Next slide, please. So I want quickly to go back and give you all some examples of this culturally grounded research and the rites of passage movement. And the rites of passage movement emerged in the early 1990s as an antidote to the triple pandemics of gun violence, drugs, and HIV/AIDS. And it was really started by one sister, Dr. Nzinga Warfield Kapok in Washington, D.C., who was concerned about the future of her children. And together with other women in Washington, D.C., they created the Rites of Passage program. And the Rites of Passage is an activity of celebration marking the successful transition from one state of being, a lived experience, to a new state of becoming. It is a significant transition phase that we move, for example, from childhood to adulthood, from adulthood to eldership, and then eldership to transition to ancestors. So these rites of passage programs were culturally grounded interventions, and most importantly, they were family-centered. It involved the family as part of the process of the growth and development of their children in this process. However, while these programs were successful, they lacked systematic evaluation. And most of the knowledge that we obtained from these early rites of passage was based upon anecdotal data rather than, quote, rigid scientific data. So an outgrowth of this was the call by the practitioners for more structured and systematic evaluation and the publication of these results in reference journals so that others can hear about it and it can enhance the possibility of these programs being funded as having been published in reference journals, which demonstrated the efficacy of their works. Next slide, please. So as an outgrowth of this, then we had these calls for more structured evaluation. And one program I want to mention specifically, it was the Heal a Woman Fighting Disease and HIV Substance Abuse Prevention Program for African-American women in Oakland, California. It was a program designed for us, by us, and with us. And that part of the Heal a Woman program is that the folks who were engaged in training and working with the African-American women, they were in the community as well as of the community. This is a critical piece because of the community means that you are participating in the same lived experiences that the participants in the program were engaged in. And ultimately, given this transformation, this program was listed in SAMHSA's registry of effective programs. Essentially, it was a community-defined practice that rose to the status of an evidence-based program, indicating the possibility of effective research moving from anecdotal data to high-quality data and data analysis that resulted in becoming evidence-based program. Next slide, please. So how do we evaluate and understand research, right? So the conceptualization of a scientific problem is always subject to the worldview. Dr. Nunley talked about worldview of the scientist, and all knowledge is related in social relations, particularly as they're defined and determined by ethnic, cultural, racial classification. In a racialized society, notice I said racialized, not racist, because racialized society is a society where race is a critical determinant of status in the society. And as we know, race is a social construct. It's a social construct that oftentimes is linked to phenotypical differences. So what the scientists perceive as truth or valid knowledge is a function of the ethnic cultural group he or she belongs to. and we say that it's part of this cultural group that you belong to. Next slide, please. Okay. You know what? I missed one slide that was there, but I'll come back to yeah, I missed one slide, but that's okay. So implicit bias. Implicit bias oftentimes enters into the creation of the research problem as well as the analysis and interpretation of the data, as Dr. Nunley clearly pointed out. But we all have implicit biases, and implicit biases comes from our cultural orientation. They're often unstated. They're unstated, but they're rooted in the fact of our upbringing, our family, our social environment, and the cultural messages that we receive from society. Next slide, please. So in our second webinar, we had asked these 4 questions, and I want you to focus on question number 4. You see, because this is a critical area in which implicit bias becomes clear in terms of answering the question. Caregivers from families with a lot of challenges don't want to be involved with their child's mentoring program. And we had the overwhelming majority of the participants in that webinar agreeing to this statement or answering that they have heard this statement said. So if this is the mindset of agencies and programs and individuals that are engaged in the mentoring process, that has implications for the type of services and the way that services are being provided to the population. Next slide, please. So quickly, in terms of research, Du Bois and et al. Identified 4 features that they see as sources of influence on the results of mentoring programs evaluation. And I put there, missing is the caregiver engagement piece. That this is the critical piece that we are bringing as an addition to what you are doing in the in your mentoring program. Next slide, please. So here are some key factors in terms of program structure and design. Goal-oriented programs have greater impact than informal membership. One-on-one mentoring is most effective, but group mentoring can work. Long-term programs lasting 12 months show stronger relationship than short-term mentorship. Mentor and mentoring background matching. Mentees benefit more when they share gender, race, or similar experiences with their mentors. And based upon the evidence that we have, we know that this is one of the most difficult areas in the mentoring process of how do you match mentor and mentee with the same gender, race, or similar lived experiences. Training and support for structured training for mentors improve their effectiveness and mentee satisfaction. And in terms of frequency of interaction, programs where mentors and mentees meet at least twice per month show better results. So this is what the field is telling us about the mentoring program. So next slide, please. So what we want to do is talk about caregiver engagement, program development, and research work plan. We developed a work plan in which we can begin to work through some of the ways in which caregiver engagement becomes part of the process. So based upon what we discussed in webinars 1 and 2, we are suggesting a policy change that may be necessary, and policy change in terms of caregiver engagement in your mentoring program. Some agencies, this could be mandatory based upon the funding sources, or we see it as a voluntary enhancement of your program that will make mentoring program more effective. But the policy leads to procedures. How do we implement the policy? How do we do it? How do we engage in outreach and recruit recruitment to recruitment and selection of caregivers. That means we have to develop criteria for outreach and for selection of caregivers. What is the level of involvement of caregivers as a procedural issue coming out of this policy? Do we engage them in the design of the activities, or are they there just as a figurehead in the program? And what is the matching of the mentor with the caregiver? Previously, the matching was the mentor with the mentee. But now we add a third dimension, which is the caregiver. So we have to have a triad now of mentor, mentee, and caregiver. And so that matching is a critical dimension in the program. The activity, so our policy leads to procedures, which leads to certain activities. This is what we plan to do. What, when, who, right? What, when, and who, right? And then we, as the activities, what is our procedures for recruitment and selection of mentors? Now that we have this third dimension, are we going to use the same method of selection of mentors when it was a one-to-one relationship? And then we have what is the caregiver support system and the mentor support system. So now we have to develop, as part of our activities, an ecosystem that includes the caregiver, the mentor, the youth, and program staff. So we augmenting what we are doing in a large way. Now, when you come to activities, there are 5 processes that are necessary for program development. What is the intent of your activities? Why are you going to do what you plan to do? Why? The why is important because in the why is where the issues of implicit bias can and does oftentimes emerge. What are the objectives of your activities? And the objectives, remember our objectives have to be SMART. The SMART objectives, they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So you lay out your objectives. In terms of the, what do you actually do? What is the content of your of the activities? Is it just individual rap sessions that we have with between the mentor, the mentee, and the caregiver? Or is there a structured program? One of the things that we saw previously was that structured programs tend to be more effective, right? So we have to look at that. And then the process, how do you do it? And then the outcomes. And the outcomes leads to the research. So the last column then in this program development and research work plan is our research and evaluation. And this answers the question, how do we know we have achieved the outcomes that we have specified as part of our activities? And the process outcome, we make a distinction between process outcomes and program impact. So you look at program fidelity. Did we do what we said we were going to do? How many youth did we serve? How many youth retained if it's an extended period program, and how many caregivers we selected, and how many were retained. That's all process data, but it's also some of that process data could be utilized as evidence of satisfaction by the mentee and by the caregiver. So if they are satisfied with the activities, they tend to remain with the program through its entirety. And then the program impact, oftentimes they look at those visible criteria like GPA, absenteeism, suspension, etc. But there's other issues in terms of cultural grounding and cultural values and participation in pro-social activities and engagement in peer support, supporting others in the program. And then there are issues around community enhancement. So these are all outcomes. And remember, the youth i.e. the mentee, is located within a family. And so the impact of the mentoring activity could be found in family changes, and that family is located within a specific community. So this revised or expanded model then requires or should facilitate additional research outside of the normal parameters of what folks are traditionally measured. And then the methods, we can do the pre-post test, surveys, anecdotal data, and observational data. And finally, it leads to data analysis. So what we are suggesting is a framework that would allow mentoring programs to assess and incorporate caregivers in the mentoring activities, and that is a research design that comes out of this that would allow the programs to assess the efficacy of the involvement of caregivers and caregiver engagement in the mentoring program. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's not there. But I want to leave you all with an African proverb. And so the African proverb says, even an experienced person will learn from something new. So as our experienced mentors, you can possibly learn something new from this caregiver involvement. Thank you, and pass it back to Salon.
Thank you, Babaji. We appreciate you so, so much for all your wisdom and all your knowledge. You guys, we were truly blessed today. This is a very, very knowledgeable man and has done great work. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, all that knowledge with us. Thank you. Renee, do you want to chime in and give us some of your feedback on that?
Sure. Thanks, Salon. There's so much richness in what we've just heard from both Dr. Nunley and Dr. Goddard. And I think that proverb was a perfect way to end those comments about the how much there is to be gained from new perspectives and from different ways of thinking about things. And Dr. Nunley reminding us of the importance of worldviews and that we all carry them. And they're really pretty radically different worldviews. And so then how are we going to engage and connect and make sure that the program meets the needs of all of us, you know, and people with different worldviews, and that all of that is accommodated. I think it's so important, the culturally grounded framework, that kind of thinking that Dr. Goddard introduced, both in terms of research and in terms of practice, of really thinking about the perspectives that people are bringing to the table, what is important and valued by different groups of people, and how that would play out in the program. It's not just about who's included or whose voice is heard, but it's sharing power and having people be equal collaborators in the process. So when Dr. Goddard's talking about community engaged research, it's really community members being equal partners in the research process. And I think that's a great metaphor or a framework for thinking about caregiver engagement as well. It's having caregivers, parents be equal partners in the mentoring process and in discerning, trying to promote the success of the mentoring relationship. Those caregivers are essential for that. And then the other thing that I was really struck in listening to these comments is how we've really, I think in the field of mentoring, been limited in our notion of what is an outcome of mentoring. And Dr. Goddard was touching on that and expanding about how both, it might not just be the young person who's experiencing benefits. And I've heard this from families, that what a relief it can be to have this positive, supportive, other important adult enter into the ecology of the family and be a part of the family, and what a contribution that can be. And then also Dr. Goddard was taking it a step further and saying the community, that there might be benefits to communities when we have mentor-rich environments, when there's lots of these kinds of productive, meaningful engagements going on, that communities can be enriched by that. I'm reminded of an observation I did in a school once of some school-based mentoring relationships. And I ended up talking with the custodian on that particular day, where I was standing off on the sideline and standing next to that person. And she said to me, she said, man, it's just made such a difference since this mentoring program has come to this school, this cafeteria, because the meetings were happening in the cafeteria. This cafeteria feels really different on the days that the mentors are here. And so thinking about that's not just a single mentor youth relationship, but that's a whole community, that school community being kind of impacted by those sort of meaningful connections happening. So turning to our caregivers and thinking about what's important to them in the mentoring relationship, we might learn a lot about the kinds of outcomes that we're not measuring in mentoring and things that we're really missing in terms of understanding what a difference these relationships can make. Those are just some of my thoughts in that very rich
Thank you.
set of comments.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot that you all said. It's just really looking at how do you do that and really capture that moment of those bright spots and really build upon them. That's really important to parents, to get best practices that really work and that really fit the different needs of the different communities that mentors serve. And how do you do that and make a model out of it, right? So thank you guys all for all that you guys have brought to the table for parents and for providers and orgs that's here. And so next, I'm going to hand it off to my awesome Dusty.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And so I just want to echo my thanks, but I won't spend time on that because we're running just a few minutes behind. So I'm going to try to help us catch up a little bit. Where we're going to next is to really talk about practice strategies. Now that we've kind of laid out some philosophical understandings and understood the research, we got to get to how we can actually support you out there in the field. We also have some questions coming in the question box. So I want to take one of the questions real quick because it's one that I can point us in the right direction. And then we'll go to our next practice strategies segment here. But Courtney asked, are there some good examples of orgs out there that are incorporating family engagement effectively? So yes and no. Yes, of course, there are programs that are out there doing a great job with this. We had a webinar on this series back in 2021 where we featured a couple. Hank's program does that. Zalan has her Black Parent Resource Center, which is organized that way. And we had a Chicago program on the panel a couple of years ago. There are some good examples out there. What we don't know is how many and what are they actually doing. And so I'm going to table the rest of the question because at the end of the webinar, we have kind of a call to action to join a research study on exactly that question. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and answer that now, that we'll talk about it more too. But this group has been designing a research study exactly with that in mind. We're looking specifically at Black and Brown led programs and how they engage families and parents so that we can see how that informs the field. So I want to answer that real quick. Let's go to, this slide was just to kind of move us along. This is now that we have the knowledge, what do we do with it? And as we said at the beginning of the session, we want to both start implementing things, but also be building a knowledge base. So it's a lot of testing out new solutions and ideas, right? And working together with diverse perspectives to create that knowledge base and to try things out and then bring those answers back to a larger group here. So we want to try to practice some of that today. Jake, I think we can do the polls because I think I have a way to do it where it'll move quickly. So can we go to the next slide? And the next, thank you. So just to recap from our previous sessions, there were some themes that our experts shared. The idea that this is transformative work, that you can't just make tweaks to your program. We all have to transform our thinking and our approach in a very deep way, that implicit bias is everywhere. It's in all of us. We have to work on that all the time and really working for a collaborative approach. So those are some great starts, but where can we go deeper? So since we're all building knowledge together, we went to you. We asked you in the last segment, the last webinar, what are ways that you felt your programs could grow in terms of parent engagement? What isn't being done that could be done? And your answers fell into three categories. One was that you thought you should see more ways for parents to connect with each other, that you weren't doing a whole lot of community building out there with your families and giving them a chance to get to know each other, get to know your staff, things like that. 2 was engaging them in your program planning and design, getting their feedback, getting their input, having them help drive things. 3 was improving the ways in which your mentors and your staff interact with your parents, that maybe they don't actually have a good enough skill set for the actual engagement. Can we go to the next slide? So here's what we want to do with that knowledge. That was great feedback we got from you all. And so for the first one, ways that parents and caregivers can connect with each other, those bullet points are things that you all said were some ways that your program, that you'd like to see your program doing this. So we want to get a little data from you as we go here. Jake is popping up a poll. How many of your programs have created ways for parents and families to connect with each other and your staff? So go ahead and do that. And while you're doing that, you're also welcome to drop in the chat specifics. How do you do it? So throw that in the chat. And while you're all doing that, Zalan, do you want to work with our expert panelists here and see what they have to say about this item?
Absolutely. Let me get my life together. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, Dr. Numley, how important is it that parents connect to each other? And is there any research on this? And how would you suggest programs try to consider doing this?
So ask the parents. Ooh, so simple. Ask them. Don't assume. Just ask. Because remember when we looked at the Baba G provided the data around, he looked at how do you define parent involvement, right? And it was concerning, but guess what I was thinking about? How did we define involvement? So that is going to skew the data a certain way. It's like, what do you mean by involvement? Is involvement me sitting in your classroom or being at your program? Is it donating things? Hey, guess what? If I'm sending the child to your program and the child's a part of me, doesn't that mean I'm involved? So again, to answer your question directly, ask the parent. Ask them what they want instead of assuming that or even just offering a bunch of things that you think may be diverse and wide range, but maybe it's not. Just talk directly to the parent. You'd be surprised what you'll discover. That's my answer.
Thank you for that. And I also think that when parents get connected to each other and they feel safe, that also can help a program be stronger, because it's not like I'm just connected to the program. I'm also building community within the program, because I didn't know this parent, and maybe we have a child in the same grade, or maybe our child has the same interest. It's other, I think, platforms that programs can use when you talk about how you're gonna bring the parent in and be authentic about it. So not just checking a box. So you're here, we talk to you, and here goes your manual, sign it and goodbye. Really allowing a space for parents to get to know each other and build community. So when the program's gone, the parents can still, have that community maybe they formed through the mentor program. So that's just something I felt was good in there. So,
and you know what, too, let's go from a cultural lens, too. There's something in the African-American community called fictitious kin. That's what they call them. But it's not fictitious. I'm connected to everybody. So you get to be the village mom, and it is okay. It is okay. So the Western way is very, if I'm the biological parent, right? I'm one, but it's in a old school African, American, the village. There's a village mom. I remember when I was able to come to school with my daughter, I was everybody's mama, right? And I said, I'm here to represent the other mothers. But if you don't understand that, you think, oh my goodness, she's the only mom that cares. No, she's the only mom that can actually be there at this time. It doesn't mean the other mothers don't care.
Absolutely.
So that whole different village concept that's very Western to think only biological. can do it. But anyway, I'll be quiet because of time.
Excellent.
Thank you, excellent. Go ahead, Dad.
Yeah, so let's go to our next theme that you all came up with, which was engaging parents in program design and planning. And you can see on the slide some examples of how you all said that you do that. So how many of you do this? How many of you do surveys or parent advisories or different ways of engaging your parents from your program in what you do? Well, more of you than I might have thought. That's great. And go ahead and drop in the chat ways that you do this, specific ways that you do it would be great. And while you're doing that, Zalan, do you want to get our experts chatting? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, thank you. Dr. Gardner, I have a question for you. How important is it to involve parents in program design and planning? What do you think about that?
That's a good question, but I think that the main point about this is that the engaging parents in program design and implementation is critical because the parents bring a wealth of knowledge about their child that the mentor and the program staff would not have access to. And so it opens up the ability of the program to better serve by including the caregiver in the design of the program. For example, engaging the parent in the design of the program gives the parent a sense of validation. Too often, when caregivers of color engage with systems, they are marginalized and they feel left out because their voice is not given the appropriate recognition by programs. So by engaging them in the design, you're really validating their experience. And it gives the caregiver, the parents, a sense of belonging and ownership. And if you belong to something and you own something, you're more likely to work to make it come true. So that's a critical aspect of it. And then the other thing I would suggest is by engaging the caregiver in the design and implementation of the program, it provides part of the ecosystem of support for the mentors because the mentor and the caregiver essentially have the same vested interest in the outcome for the child. They want to see something better for the youth in the program. And so by supporting each other, it has a better chance of creating these significant changes that the program activities are trying to achieve for the youth in the program.
Thank you for that. I was going to ask one more, but you answered them all. As a wise man will. Thank
Yeah, and there's an audience question that maybe Zalan could help the panel answer. I just repasted it so we can all see it. Angelica was asking, what if you struggle to get feedback and participation with parents? What if you've tried various things and it doesn't seem to be working? Words from Zalan, do you want to moderate us for that?
Absolutely. If you're struggling, maybe the area is you need more support on identifying where your barriers are to connecting to that community. Like, do you know the community? Are they speaking other languages? Find a familiarity with that community. Do y'all share the same food? Do y'all talk the same? Do y'all shop the same? What can humanly connect you to those people that you're struggling engaging? That's the first thing I would suggest. And getting support around others that you see engage with that community. So do you see other staff or colleagues engaging with the community that you're trying to outreach, looking at tips, low-hanging fruit of things you see that people are doing already and that you can incorporate? Because like Dr. Numley said, we're all connected. It's just that sometimes language barriers and those isms get in the way of us really connecting and outreaching to others. So learning about the community that you're trying to reach out to will definitely be a big plus.
And I would suggest
Yeah.
something really simple. Guess what? You ready? Maybe that's not for you to do. Maybe you're not the one. Sometimes we have to humble ourselves and say, I'm not the best one in my program to do that particular thing. And so find out if there's someone in your program using all the things that Zalan said, but maybe you're not the one, and it's okay. It's okay, because then if you continue pushing, then it's not a good look either. And then you start feeling bad yourself, right? And then you lose your self-efficacy and all of that. So delegate if necessary. The fact that you even have the desire, that's good right there. Because like I love to sing, right? I'm Black, I'm that Black person, I don't sound that good, right? Okay, so I always ask somebody else to sing, right? But I can dance, hey, so I'm just saying, that's it.
And I think that's a good point, Dr. Nunley, in terms of, being aware of your own, as you said, your own limitations, right? And be humble enough to acknowledge it. Because too often we, as a people, we have been socialized to think that failure is not an option for us, right? And that if you fail, it's a sign. If you admit failure or admit inability to do something, it may be perceived by others as a sign of weakness, right? A sign of weakness. So we have again to understand who we are, to have a proper understanding of our own self so that we can better serve the population that we're working with. And we can always, as Dr. Nani said, delegate, delegate, delegate. No one person has all the answers, right? In addition to delegating, talk with other co-workers about what they're doing and what may be successful. And then again, part of the program, part of the process is to seek knowledge. What does the research say? What does the data say? What do others say is the best way of communicating and getting folks to give feedback?
Absolutely. Thank you guys. So helpful. I want to note that in the chat there, and Zalan, you brought it up just on your own anyway, language barrier came up as a question. How do you manage that? And that came up a couple other webinars of our series as well. So as we're answering the following question, maybe we can think about that, which actually fits well with our last theme. Jake, if we can go to the next. Oh, you're there already. Sorry. So the theme number 3 was improving staff and mentor skills for parent engagement specifically. How many of you do this? And by the way, so far the other 2 polls, it looked like it was about half and half. So that's great. And I bet we have more people on this webinar that already care about parent engagement than people who didn't come to this webinar. So good to know that at least half the folks who cared to come are already working on some of these strategies. I got you, Dr. Nunley. And put your specific strategies of how you do this in the chat, please, like you have been. That's been great. So we already know that one skill set issue is language that already just came up in question, but maybe Zalan can have our panelists comment on that and other skill set issues.
I just want to jump in really
Yeah.
fast on the language thing, and then I can,
Please.
So when there is a language barrier, please don't decide that I'm going to use the child to address that. Mm-hmm. Because that is something that happens over and over again, because let me use a Western term. I don't really like this term, but it's like you're parentifying the child. Mm-hmm. Okay, but a better way to understand that is culturally, you're doing some things. You're switching the role of the parent to the child. That's not okay. So just because you don't have the language of that particular person, then you go hire a translator. Do what you need to do. Don't make it the child. That is so embarrassing, because you're giving the child this agency. Notice I didn't say empowerment, but in this case, you actually are empowering. But anyway, you don't want the child to be in charge of the parent. And when you do that, when you go to them and say, oh, can you translate for your mom, your dad, your grandma? That's what you're doing culturally. That's not all right, y'all. That's it. That's all I want to say about that.
Well, I
Excellent.
think that was awesome, Dr. Nunley. You
Yeah.
kind of, visited that,
He
and
went
thank you
into-
for that. Yeah, go ahead, Baba G. Go ahead.
And to veggie back on Dr. Nunley's point, it's really about, as a skill, is to know the culture of the population you're working with, right? Because within different cultural groups, there are certain roles, and we don't want to engage in role reversal where we give the parenting role to the child, and now the parent is the child learning from the child. And so that culture understanding and knowledge of the cultural feature is an important skill that we have to learn. That, for example, in the community, if the grandmother say it is so, it is so, right? And oftentimes you just see the child and the mother without seeing the broader family structure that may not be residing within the same household. The Black family, oftentimes the lines of authority and decision making oftentimes transcend the individual household where the child and the parent is living. And the grandmother may be in somewhere in Mississippi, calling the shots of what's happening back at home in California. So we have to understand some of those dynamics, and we have to learn, again, we have to be culturally humble and admit that we don't know everything about every cultural group that we're working with. And so that's
Don't run around call yourself being culturally competent. You can't be
right, yeah.
competent in all the cultures that we have. I'm
Right.
sorry, Elder, didn't mean to step on you.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you brought up that idea of thing. You see, because if we look historically, this cultural competence is a dangerous word, right? Because the Bureau of Indian Affairs was very culturally competent, but they engage in culturally destructive practices when dealing with the indigenous native population. So again, you can be competent, but your practice can be destructive. You have to be culturally grounded in the culture of the group that you're working with, so that your practice does not violate the cultural precepts of the groups that you're working with. That's a big order, right? And it takes time to arrive at this cultural grounding. And the second thing I want to say is that communication, you have to learn new and different communication styles. You have to be able to talk with the parent, not to the parent. When you talk to the parent, you assume an authoritative position where you talk with the parent and you engage in a courageous conversation, because now you open yourself to hearing and understanding and appreciating what the parent and the caregiver is saying about the situation. So then the other thing that's the other skill set, again, the that is necessary is awareness of the lived experiences of the population that is being served. So the lived experience in terms of things like housing and healthcare and food and nutrition, all of those things that impact the welfare and well-being of the mentee and the caregiver becomes part of the process, because we know, for example, in particularly in the Black and Brown communities, this idea of now folks talking about food deserts, right? Where the population lack access to quality, nutritious food. And there's a predominance of fast food that are high in fatty, in salt and fat content, that contributes to health outcomes, that impact on both the mentee and the caregiver. So that becomes part of the learning curve that the mentor and the mentoring program needs to undertake as part of the learning process.
Thank you, Babaji. Thank you. Go. Thank you guys so much for that. And I have a lot more to share, but I know we're tight on time. So Dot, I'll pass it on to you. So,
Yeah, no, yeah, and I don't want to take up any time either. We've got just 5 minutes left and we want to go to Hank for our call to action in a moment here, but I think it's been a really rich discussion. And I just wanted to make an overarching point that I think will help folks here. Again, we know you're hungry for strategies, and part of you might be thinking, why didn't we spend all 3 webinars just talking about strategies? And there's actually a really key answer to that. Part of it is what we talked about, that the knowledge base is still building, and because there's been this exclusion, there's a need to talk about that. But more than that, and this is something we determined a few years ago when this movement started, and Hank and Dr. Nunley and Dr. Goddard and Zalan here were really instrumental in this. And they said, if we just start throwing out strategies, people are going to just start doing stuff without ever having changed inside. And what we really need is for them to change inside first. We need them to address their implicit bias. We need them to recognize that they're coming from a certain perspective that doesn't always work. And we have to spend time unpacking and dismantling that before we can start throwing strategies at people. And it's only today that folks are finally feeling ready to, not that we haven't given any strategies along the way, we have, but there was a real conscious choice to do this deeper learning. So we wanted you all to know that as you take these strategies away. So we are getting here close on time, and we want to give you an opportunity to stay involved in our work in a couple of different ways. So if nobody has anything, and none of the panelists have anything else burning you need to throw out there real quick, we'll go over to Hank.
Hello. It's really been a pleasure to hear all these comments and share it, but we must agree the mentoring field must transform. It can no longer be business as usual. This webinar has revealed the inclusion of all parents, especially disproportionate parents, Black and of color, may be the key. We simply, in practice and research, haven't cultivated their expertise. We have not. And because time is short with what I have to say, the key, we must become allies. And allies are those who actually, they're not necessarily marginalized, but they use their power and their privilege to support those who are. Just look at this webinar today. Allies are here together showing you the way. Everyone you're looking at today on this panel, you would never think they would come together, but because they're allies, they see the need. So I'm compelling and asking everyone to become an ally. Change the way you think. Being a mentor is great. Being a practitioner is outstanding, but change the way you think. Become an ally because you're fighting for those that are marginalized. There's so much to unpack in this short time, I have to say, but collaboration is the only way. And EPOC is ready. We're standing strong, inviting you to come and join our team. We all have this challenge of how to change our organizational policies, our procedures, and our practices, and our guidelines that include engaging all parents, especially marginalized parents, Black and of color. We got to seek new strategies of how can we get into the schools. Perhaps the PBIS model may be the way to go because it engages parents and teachers and mentors to gain success in education. We need to provide resources and training around parent engagement in these schools. We need to fight for racial justice and challenges that are facing the parents that we know need us the most. And we can't do this alone. We must collaborate. I take this very personal because I am an ally, but I was a marginalized child. And both of my parents have less than an 8th grade education, but a PhD in love. And it's because of that love, they would go to the schools every day to check to make sure periodically that I was progressing in a positive way. And because of that love, all 5 of us siblings are college graduates. So I know that parent engagement is powerful, it's meaningful, because my experience has proven that it works. So what I say to us as we come to the end, How can you leave this, this webinar and not feel a sense of urgency? Because each day we procrastinate, another child could suffocate because a parent was denied the opportunity to participate. Join us. Join EPOC. We need all of us. We need to come together. When? Now. This is a tall order for us. If we don't do it now, we'll be here 160 years later with the same conversation. It's the mercy and the love that we must show to those who are depending upon us to survive and understand that America really is the land of the brave and the home of the free. And everybody deserves to have equal opportunity. We must come together to make that become a reality. Join EPOC and let's strive and drive and go together and become one. Because that's the only way it's going to get done. Last but not least, other fields are moving forward. The education field just recently passed the curriculum in California mandating that all teachers must pass the curriculum around parent engagement. So we must catch up, move fast, because people are depending upon us. Their lives are in our hands. Please, let's move forward. As I come to a close, America, the land of the brave, the home of the free, is depending upon us as allies to be successful. You see? Thank you so much. Let's do it.
Thanks, Hank. That's awesome. And I think Jake has a couple of closing things on the mentor side. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Zalan, for moderating. What a great job you did. And thanks to all our panelists. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, huge thank you. I wish we could have just ended with Hank. I have a couple small logistic things but that was really amazing, Hank. Thank you. And thank you, Zalan and Dusty Ann, for moderating and for planning this. Thank you to our amazing panelists, Doctors Spencer, Goddard, and Nunley. It was an absolutely amazing webinar. And thank you so much to everybody today for all of your engagement. Just another minute or so of your time. Of course, we have all of these additional resources available to you. Email us if you need anything at collaborativeWebinarSeries@mentoring.org. The slides, the recording, the chat, and every resource we talked about, I'll be sending out and posting to the website in the coming week. As always, connect with your local affiliate by clicking this link or going to mentoring.org/affiliates for more support with training resources, public awareness, and advocacy. Mentoring Connector is a great resource to put your program up on if you don't already have your program there. That's where folks go to find mentoring programs to be connected with, either as mentors or as mentees. And then last but not least, we have the National Mentoring Resource Center, where you're able to apply for no-cost training and technical assistance. Remember to complete the survey that'll pop up on your screen at the end of this webinar to let us know how we did. We really appreciate you all being here with us across these 3 webinars. If you haven't seen the first 2, definitely recommend checking those out on our website. And then a special announcement, you might have seen this elsewhere, but make sure to take our National Survey of Mentoring Professionals. I believe this is at least Mentor's first ever survey of mentoring professionals across the country, with the hope to amplify all of you. We saw earlier that most of the folks in this room work with a mentoring program in some way. And so this survey is going to be really beneficial to help us advocate for more resources and funding, help us tailor our resources and professional development opportunities, and then identify trends in general to strengthen mentoring programs nationwide. So you can either scan this QR code or click that link that I just dropped in the chat to take the survey. We really appreciate it. You can also win prizes and gifts and all of that. There's lots of different ways, but most importantly, you're contributing to a really needed base of information. So again, thank you all so much for being here. This was a really amazing series. Thank you to everybody who was involved in the planning. And with that, we'll see you at the next one. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hank, for the strong finish. That was awesome, everyone.